Hi, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session of Corpus Curiosum. That's it. We are very happy to be here on our third session of this fifth edition. And welcome to this project. We can see some familiar faces already, and we hope we have an interesting event today. So before we start, we wanted to start doing some recommendations, clarifying some points regarding today's session. First of all, the session is being recorded, but it will be only recorded like the talk given by the speaker. That means that all the questions and the discussion afterwards won't be recorded, which means that you can be free to ask whatever you want. Questions and answers. So the idea is that you guys can feel free to type in the chat whatever question you might have during the talk. You guys can write it down in the chat during the talk or afterwards. And the dynamic that we are going to do today is that once, we'll be letting the person to ask the question themselves, even if it's already written, right? So the idea of writing the question is to stimulate the different, the discussion and so on. But then, differently from what we have done in the past, the person will be the one asking the question. So it's a bit more dynamic and natural. And then the speaker can answer. And then if the person asking the question has any further note, of course, can be added. And finally, the length, we aim to close the session at 4:30 p.m. in GMT +1 latest. But of course, you are free to leave earlier. And what are we doing here? Well, as you might know already, Corpus Curiosum, this is one of the talks of Corpus Curiosum that aims to stimulate critical thinking in neuroscience through engaging with early career researchers and fostering discussion. So this was an initiative that was born already 3 years ago. And this is basically the main goal that we have, right? Especially, it's open, of course, to everyone in academia, in science in general, neuroscience. But of course, we put a special focus in early career researchers. These are our 3 fundamental values, which are that we support early career researchers, mainly because of the difficulties that we are facing, right, when we start our academic paths. Second, embrace diversity. We are fighting intersectional inequalities and amplifying underrepresented voices in science. And third, and especially related to the previous point, we aim to be accessible. We advocate for open science and ensure everyone can join our events. And that's why all the events that we organize are for free. And also that's why we like to do them online, because that makes them more accessible, right? This is us, the core of Corpus Curiosum. We are based in different countries around the world, and we are also at different paths at different stages in our academic career. And we are very happy to be supported by our sponsors, especially by PENS and by IBRO, that have been supported us from the very beginning and that had made Corpus Curiosum possible, right? Also, we are very happy to announce that we have been awarded by the IBRO Diversity Grant 2 times, the third time is still in process. But yes, this is one of the things that we are very proud of. And we also wanted to talk a couple of words about Curious Minds School, which is another initiative that we did for the first time a couple of months ago. This was a school that was composed by this very cool bunch of young neuroscientists that aimed once again to stimulate critical thinking in a more interactive way. And we are saying this because probably in the future we'll be organizing similar events. So please stay tuned through our Twitter account or our newsletter. So yeah. You guys can be informed by this, but what we are going to be doing today is Corpus Curiosum Series 5. We are doing today the 3rd session. We have attendees from a lot of different countries and different institutions enrolled. And this is today's speaker today. Lucía Vaquero, which is quite recognizable because of her wonderful hair, right? Lucía Vaquero works at the intersection between her three passions, neuroscience, music, and her motivation for helping others. Right now, she acts as a senior researcher at the Center of Cognitive and Computational Neuroscience, which is based in Madrid, where she's starting her own research line focused on neuroscience and music, exploring the effects at brain, cognitive, and emotional levels of musical experience and interventions through humans' lifetime. Recently, she has been awarded with a funded fellowship from the prestigious Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions Program to carry out her project, which is actually quite in line with the topic that we'll be discussing today, which is named Social Media Artistic Training in Teenagers, SMART, that she will be developing in different collaborating centers: New York University, Complutense University of Madrid, Max Planck Institute from Empirical Aesthetics, Germany, and a private company, Salumedia Labs in Spain. So a very interesting curriculum, as we can see. And this is the topic today. Is technology a bad influence for our brains? Neuroscientific perspective of smart device usage. So this is all on my side. I'm gonna pass you the mic, Lucía. We are very excited to hear your talk.
Okay, so yeah, thank you again. Thank you all for connecting today. So yeah, as Ines just said, my talk is gonna be called Is Technology a Bad Influence for Our Brains? And we're gonna try to see challenges and how to study it from a neuroscientific point of view. So yeah, let me go here. Okay, so the thing is that technology is a super broad term, of course, and yeah, there's a bunch of things that can come to mind when speaking about technology, but actually, like, thought, and also thanks to the subtitle that we put, that we are going to be focusing on digital devices with internet access, right? Like tablets and computers and smartphones. And let me just narrow this even more, narrow down even more this. So I'm mostly going to be focusing on social media. As Ines just said, I'm working on a project related to that. So I wanted to be focused more on, yeah, like screen time, smartphone use, smart device usage, and social. So first of all, before jumping in, like, the first question would be like, why do we care about this, right? And let me just throw there some data, some numbers. So just 10 years ago, only 33% of the global population was using internet. And only 24% of the global population was using social media. 10 years ago, like, okay, like you're younger than me, but 10 years ago you were already born and living and using social media probably too. And just comparing by with this report from April this year, just 2 months ago, now we are in about almost 65% of global population using the internet. And there's almost 60% of, well, identities represented in social media. We know that it's not a one-on-one situation. It's not that 60% of the global population has a social media account, but at least these numbers can tell us how important it is on a daily basis for a huge amount of people in the globe, right? And you have here, yeah, like average amount of hours in which people use the internet. So a lot of our waking time, we are using internet and also social media. So it seems very important to me also because it is a kind of new technology and we haven't had enough time yet to see what to expect and what are the effects, what are the long-term effects of using the internet, of using social media on a daily basis as much as we are using it now, right? So as I was telling you guys, I have thought about a million ways of putting this presentation together. So in the end, it's not gonna be, I don't think it's like super structured. And I think I'm gonna be like going back and forth on some concepts, but I hope it is clear and interesting anyway. So I wanted to cover like basic definitions, for example, of digital devices and social media and all the challenges that come with that. I wanted to talk about the variety of activities that we can do online and on social media specifically, and how that translates into different brain functions, and what are the evidence of how our brains function or how our brains are affected by social media. And with that, I wanted to talk about the challenges that doing experiments or doing studies around social media like entangles. And as it was just the easiest and the most logical way of doing it, I'm just gonna be, intertwined with all these. I'm gonna just put some examples from my own experience with my current project, because just I think it is easier to see like some concrete examples too. But I don't want to make the presentation around my project. Despite that, the next slide is about introducing my project, just for you to understand the examples that I'm going to give you later on. So just super quickly, you know the title already, and the funding that we got from Horizon Europe, from the Maria Sklodowska Action Program. So basically what we want to do is 2 digital artistic interventions in teenagers. We're going to mostly focus on 9th graders, so between like 13 to 15 years old. And in these interventions, they're gonna last for 3 months. They're gonna have 2 hours of lessons per week, and they're gonna just see some basic structure like appreciation stuff, but then also they're gonna learn how to edit and compose either music or visual arts, so mainly photography and video. And they're gonna have like parallel structures, the 2 interventions. And on all the sessions, they're gonna have also like reflections and exercises around other topics. They're gonna use social media in all the lessons that they have, and they're gonna reflect also on many topics like creative process, teamwork, collaboration, but also how do artists use social media, how people comment on social media. We're gonna reflect on hate culture, etc. Right? So we want to give the kids some tools to see if they use it on their daily basis. Then after the intervention, we're going to have also a control group that that is not going to be involved in any of the trainings during the 3 months that they are involved in the experiment. And then after the experiment, they will be able to complete the trainings if they want to. And we're going to have an evaluation before and after the intervention. And I will give you more details later. So with that in mind, let's go back on track. So social media, like what is social media? Like there is so many applications, so many websites that can be considered social media. It's kind of overwhelming. And when you go to see what are the definitions or the most common definitions in social media are, so they are websites or applications that serve as means for interaction among people, to create and share ideas and information, to exchange, to communicate. It is community-based. It is based on content sharing and interaction, and that just facilitates sharing stuff in general, multimedia, text, artistic creations and whatnot. But if you think about all these, these definitions seem pretty simple, but actually, if you try to categorize like all the applications, for example, that I was listing, like there are tons of ways in which you can categorize the different social media apps that are out there. And if you check out like just this example, for example, that I found, there are really different applications, like, for example, Twitch, Pinterest, and Facebook can be considered social media, and you would use it for like completely different things, I think, right? Like, you can comment stuff and you can interact with others, but I would I don't know, like there are activities that are really different between all of them, right? And when we go to how, from the neuroscientific point of view or the scientific point of view, when we go to see what the literature says about that, that is the next funny thing that you find is that they talk about screen-based media, digital media, social media use, screen time. And it's like, well, why? Like, that's the first challenge, right? Like, I think we have a definition problem, because how similar are screen time, digital media use, screen use, social media use, etc.? Like, do they overlap? How much do they overlap? And if you check those papers, like the papers that are there, you can see that in some, for example, they are focusing only on tablets or only on smartphones. And in others, screen time can also cover like video games and television and use of the computer. So how can we like extrapolate and make universal our conclusions from our studies if we're using one term or different, either like we're using different terms for the same thing, or we're using one term that covers many different things depending on the study. So that's one of the first like conceptual problems of like in this field. And since I said that I would put some examples, so coming back to my project just for a second, in my project, for example, we're going to focus mostly on a smartphone. I'm going to ask them about whether they use tablets or not, but I'm going to focus on smartphones and on social media use. And we have, for example, a questionnaire. Again, I'm not going to give you details about all the evaluations and whatnot. If you have questions about it, we can talk later. But for example, I have one questionnaire about the attitudes and opinions and use of social media, and they have a list of social media sites, but I'm also giving room for the participants to add to the list any other apps that they use and that they consider social media. And yeah, again, my focus is adolescents between 13 and 16 years old. So most of the literature that I'm gonna comment here is focusing on social media effects or social media use in children, teenagers, and young adults, just for you to know. So, okay, so as we were saying before, there are different ways of categorizing social media. And mostly they are based on the activities that you can carry out online using these apps or these websites. And this is not a comprehensive, definitely not comprehensive. Sorry about this. I'm just gonna move it here. Sorry about that. So this is not a comprehensive list by any means of the activities that you can carry using social media, like different apps of social media. You can use it for staying in touch with friends and colleagues and family. You can use it for job-related stuff, for managing finances, for learning new skills, just to be up to date with news and information, for watching videos, for gaming, for planning a travel, or whatever. And if we go one step further and say, okay, there's all these activities that I can do online, and what does all those like what do all those activities mean, like brain-wise in the brain? Like how can we understand these activities in different brain functions, right? Again, it is not a comprehensive list. This is just like from the top of my head, what could all these activities mean at the brain level? And we can see that just using social media, it can be seen as a way of practicing many things like learning, memory, attention, social interaction, curiosity, imagery, creativity, music processing, executive functions and visual spatial functions, etc. Right? So definitely we're taking something, or we want to study something that is really broad, that it implies a practice of many different activities and abilities. But then the next question would be, well, okay, but this seems like too nice. And actually, if you're living in this world, you probably have seen a lot of news in the recent years talking about all the dangers that social media has for our brains and our behavior. So yeah, it is true. Like if we try to think about, well, if we are exposed to this like for too long, or if we are exposed to within this context to some stimuli that are somewhat triggering negative stuff, we can talk about this later too. But yeah, there are some problems that we can also, like theoretically speaking, that we can think about, right? Like maybe we can get overwhelmed by the amount of information that we can find online. We can be like triggered with anxiety just checking the news. We can also get lazy about learning stuff, or maybe it is detrimental for our memory because we can always search online what we need. We can also have some feelings of disconnection or loneliness. It can also promote like unstimulating behaviors, as is scrolling passively through Instagram for hours, and and it can also like stimulate like misinformation, or well, a bunch of things, right? This is like from a theoretical point of view, just if we were planning an experiment, the things that we can just think from the top of our heads, right? So what have been found in actual like in the research literature specifically? So social media, smartphone use, digital media use, screen time, you know what I'm talking about, has been associated with both negative and positive outcomes or effects at the behavioral level. So on the one hand, it has been reported that social media or smartphone use or digital media use has negative effects on impulsivity, for example, executive functions, attention, cognitive control in general, emotional control too, self-esteem and self-concept, on academic performance in the case of young kids. It has also been related with an increased risk of anxiety and depression, and that can also lead to like long-term or chronic anxiety and depression, feelings of loneliness, irritability, also hyperactivity, problems with sleep, problems with like rule breaking or aggressive behavior, antisocial behavior, addiction-like behavior, as we know that there's like quite extended, the addiction to smartphones and not, and also like a reduction in life satisfaction. So all those have been reported in these papers that I'm mentioning here and others too. But then on the other side, some of these same papers and others also report some positive effects that social media and smartphone use have, like for example, promoting healthy habits or boosting creativity, helping in learning and acquiring new skills, improving the empathetic abilities and social interaction. They can also lead to people be like more engaged in health promotion and prevention activities. In adolescents specifically, compared to young adults or to adults in general, it seems that they are more susceptible to the beneficial effects that social media can have on mental health, which is also really interesting. At least in my case, it's super interesting because that means that is a window in which we can actually intervene, basically. And it's promising, right? And there's also the online social support that new generations that have grown up with social media and smartphones feel like as something super crucial in their life, and is really positive, right? Cool. So then going back to the example again, one of the key hypotheses that we described in our proposal, for example, for SMART, back in 2021, when I wrote this proposal, we said, well, maybe it's not about the use per se or their overuse, even if you use it for a lot of hours. It's not that you use it for a lot of hours, like the smartphone or the social media per se. It's more about what are you doing online? How do you use social media, right? And actually, in these 2 years since I applied, I've seen many other reports saying exactly the same. It is probably not the use or the overuse or how many hours, but it's much more about what do you do online and what are the effects that has on your life, depending also on your baseline features and whatnot, right? So basically in SMART, we want to, as I said, give the teenagers tools to use social media differently and to try to like potentiate the positive effects and overcome the negative effects that social media seem to have, which is still to be proven, right? And we want to focus on cognitive and mental health measures, and we want to see longitudinal changes. So that's to keep with the experiment that I put as an example. Okay, so that's behaviorally. Let's move to brain networks. Okay, talking about brain networks, we can of course think theoretically in both like functional and structural networks or structural regions and whatnot. So I actually these images, I know they are not the prettiest. They are from neuroscientific.org. That is not, again, they may not be super beautiful, but they are super useful. It's like a way of visualizing kind of a meta-analysis of different functions. If you don't know it, I recommend it. So you can see, for example, here some regions correlated to music perception or language perception, like it can be like the auditory cortices, learning, like related to basal ganglia, for example, memory and emotional processing with hippocampus, parahippocampus, amygdala, etc. And there would be also like going back to all these, the list of brain functions that we were mentioning that can be practices during social media activities. There's also a bunch of white matter tracks that would be also related and could be potentially affected by social media usage, right? Like it can be the corpus callosum, connecting both hemispheres, like superior longitudinal fasciculus, the fornix, the cingulum, and the uncinate more on the emotional side. But again, all this is just theoretically speaking, based on all that list that we made of potential activities. And I'm gonna throw this here, but actually I'm not gonna, I didn't know how to talk about this without talking for hours. So I'm just gonna throw this here. Another important point and problem is like both, like first, yeah, we know several regions related to several functions, but we're still learning what are the proper patterns that are considered to be normal in a human brain associated to every function, right? And then when you are doing a study, like how can you categorize an effect on the brain? Especially, I mean, if it's a longitudinal one, it can be you can be a bit more certain. If you correlate with behavior, yes, sure, you can see if this is good or bad. But then again, just a trait of the brain of having more gray matter on one area or more activity on this network, how can you say that something is good or bad just when we are still figuring out what all these neuroimaging markers mean, right? So yeah, I'm gonna just throw that there and we can discuss later. And then going back to this, like, what are the evidence on the literature around social media? And first off, there are not that many reports using social media. So most reports are only behavioral. And the few reports that use either structural or functional neuroimaging, yeah, they have reports some areas related or some networks like involving like middle and lateral prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, the orbitofrontal, so regions that are really related, for example, with all the emotional control and cognitive control, the cingulum, corpus callosum, superior longitudinal and inferior longitudinal fasciculi. But then again, like some of these reports are also like really region of interest driven. So they wanted to see, for example, networks related with the visual work form area or with the medial prefrontal cortex. And yeah, those studies are always cool, of course, if you have a super a priori on one topic or it's like your region of interest for whatever reason, right? But I think we need much more, like many more studies that check whole brain what's happening, because it is a new enough area of study to not have solid a prioris, right? So yeah, in my project, actually, we want to see both functional and structural networks. We are gonna use resting state both in MEG and in fMRI, and we're gonna also acquire T1 diffusion weighted imaging in the MRI to have, well, to be able to study both gray matter and white matter. So I think I'm going super fast, I'm sorry. But anyway, so another crucial problem, now that we have talked about the behavioral and the neuroimaging part and all the missing points that we have in the literature, one of the crucial problems in this literature so far is that everything is self-reported. Everything, like especially the measure that we are most interested in, that is screen time or social media use or digital media usage. Okay, all of that is self-reported. And we all know the bias that self-report has, right? Like we actually, like there's a bias very well reported, very well described of trying to please the person that is asking you about this when you are doing a self-report. So there is a huge bias in that aspect. And also, like, if we're looking specifically on adolescents and kids, like, they are much more prone to this kind of bias. So how can we edify, like, build anything based on something that is that is basically altered just from the beginning, right? And then also something that was really surprising for me when I started to read in this literature is that some of the health, like mental health markers that they use are also based on parental reports. And it's like, sure, parental reports are super informative and super interesting, but in my opinion, like, there are a lot of tools that you can use to kind of characterize the mental health of your participants, right? So yeah, that was something curious. And then just as another point of reflection, I don't know if you have ever tried to, answer from the top of your head, just try to guess how many hours have you used your phone, or how many hours have you spent on Instagram in the last week, and then try to go to the built-in app, for example, of your smartphone and see, or the tracking app, if you have a tracking app for usage of your phone, to verify how far off you are of your estimation. But it's usually huge. Like, yeah, there's people that maybe have been tracking themselves for a long time and they know better. But for most of us, when you try to guess it, and then you check the actual time that you've spent there, you will have always spent much more time than you think. Also, I mean, it's logic, because it's just, I mean, it makes sense, because social media and screen time, we know that screens by themselves, they made us so engaged in whatever are they showing us to us, that we forget about everything else. So of course we lose track of time. So again, self-report on that is kind of a weak measure in my mind. So okay, so I hope you can see the basic stuff. Good enough. Okay, so just last example, last part of the example of the SMART project. So I, of course, when I was planning, I was trying to overcome all those things that I don't think that are so great for, like, experiment design point of view. But of course, first of all, like, there are things that you always have to self-report, especially if you're working with minors, like the kind of contents that they like or share or follow, or how do they use social media, is always going to be a self-report because of privacy, right? But then one of the things that I was most proud of was to promote, like, propose to do a tracking app. Like, I was thinking on asking all the kids to download a tracking app on their phones, and also this same tracking app in different devices in their household. But oh well, turns out that the ethics committees think that that is super invasive. So we're not going to be able to use a tracking app, and even less in different devices. So the solution that we thought is about, well, we're going to ask weekly. That was going to be the idea, to check weekly the usage. So weekly, they're going to have to fill the information on their usage of the smartphone, and specifically the social media apps that they are using, based on the built-in app or information that every smartphone has. And that is the best solution that I found. Is not self-report, is not a tracking app either. So not great, but well, we'll see what happens with that. Then the other thing is, in my case, we wanted to do this in a public high school, because we thought that these kind of interventions are going to be much more interesting for the kids attending public high schools, because they can, at least some of them, it can be much harder for them to find a training like this on their spare time otherwise. So we're actually now applying to the Department of Education Ethics Board to see if they approve us the study, and if that's the case, we will go to this public high school that we have partnered up in Brooklyn. Otherwise, we would have to move to a private school. We'll see about that. And then, of course, let's not forget that we will also have other problems that are common to any other experiment, like related to logistics, basically, right? So for example, I wanted to do the interventions 4 hours per week, and it's going to be 2 hours per week in the end, because we'll have to fit in the curriculum and the advisory lessons time schedule that the high school has. And also, yeah, I'm going to use proper neuropsychological tests and not only the parental reports for checking mental health and cognitive characterization, but again, it's never going to be the same as having a proper, super detailed psychological evaluation, right? So just as a wrap up here, as in everything else in science, I think, but I think the key is try to find the balance between doing the observation as ecologically as possible, so then you can just go back from the conclusions of your experiment to the real world and see the applications per se and the importance that it may have, while you control for factors that you are interested in studying, and but also to, you know, at the same time you abide to the ethical regulations and to adapt to the logistical issues that, of course, some of them you never can like predict. Some others, either at the moment that you're making the proposal, you know that you're going to have to deal with some problems. But yeah, in any case, yeah, again, the balance is the key. But yeah, I mean, I would be happy to listen to all the feedback and comments that you have on this. But